then let us get started. I will call us to order and roll call, please.
Fan City,
Here.
County of Monterey,
Here.
Seaside,
Here.
Veranda,
Here.
Delray Oaks,
Here.
Salinas,
Here.
Pacific Grove,
Here.
Veranda, Monterey,
You already said Veranda.
Marina Coast.
I
Here.
think you missed Castroville and did Veranda twice.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Castroville.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could ask Director Garcia Arrezola if he might lead us.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We get to agenda item 4, agenda additions to the agenda. Staff, any additions?
None here.
All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 5, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Anyone from the public wishing to comment on agenda item 5, which is the approval of the agenda? All right, seeing none. And do we have, I know that our vice chair might be coming in on Zoom. Is he actually here?
I didn't know if he was or
No,
not.
he is not.
He is not.
Okay, so since he's not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous approval of the agenda. We go to agenda item 6, public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now for not more than 3 minutes. Comments on any other matter listed on the agenda are welcome at the time the matter is being considered by the board. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Bill Lipe. I'm a resident of Monterey County. And I just want to start off by saying, I think you have a heck of a leader here. I think Paul and his team here, I've seen some things the last few months, presentations publicly and trips down to present to some folks, to other folks in the public. And I think you have a real good team here. And I just want to take a moment to say that. So thank you for your service. You know, we got some pressing issues out there. I think we all know that. And I think we need to empower leaders like Paul and the GSA executive director and the general manager of the water agency. We need to give these leaders that do the work a playbook to go forward to help fix the issues we face. They're big. Some have been neglected for years, decades. They need a lot of money. And of course, they need a lot of work. So giving these leaders a kind of playbook they can use to help be as efficient as possible, to be as quick as possible, and to fix the issues that I believe can be fixed with the proper focus and time and with leaders like you have here. The complexities are, you know, I think they can be solved. And especially when you have more eyeballs in the situation. I worked in software development for a long time. The more people you can get looking at something, the better the result's going to be. But, you know, I think we all need to, I've had to do this myself at times, confront and eliminate any inherent biases or conflicts of interest that may hinder our progress. It's easy to recuse. I've done it many times. You know, the board will figure it out. But each day we delay is a missed opportunity for a sustainable future. I hope that we can act now to give a playbook to the folks that need it, to help us move across this goal line of securing our water future. Thank you for the time, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lipe. Anyone else from the public wishing to address the board? All right, and we do have a couple on Zoom. If you wish to address us, raise your Zoom hand. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do any directors wish to pull anything from consent? Anyone from the public wishing to pull anything from consent? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the public wishing to comment? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous approval. Thank you very much. Get to committee reports. Agenda item 8A, budget and personnel. Anything to report, or do you just wish to receive the draft minutes? I'll entertain a motion to receive the draft minutes.
So moved, Your Honor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on the item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous approval. Recycled Water Committee. Any comments from Recycled Water? Chair? All right.
Move approval, Your Honor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on receipt of the Recycled Water Committee draft minutes of May 16th? All right. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Once again, unanimous approval. Thank you very much. We get to our first action item, agenda item 9A, consider adoption of resolution 2024-05 to approve a fiscal year budget. Staff, please.
Thanks, Tom. So I guess that was a week and a half ago now. We had the budget workshop and we did take all the comments and made some slight modifications. There are a few things we still need to look into. I know there was the discussion on moving forward with a comprehensive rate and fee study. We need to get into that a little bit to understand the full magnitude of the work as well as the resources and to see if we can get that done in an expeditious fashion. Beyond that, what Fred will go over is sort of a shortened version of what you saw on the 23rd of May, if I'm not mistaken. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask Fred.
Thanks, Paul. And yeah, like Paul was saying, we've kind of had an abbreviated presentation tonight of kind of what we went over previously. So, okay. So yeah, basically this budget again covers all of our funds. Obviously, the biggest fund for us is the wastewater fund. Total basically revenues and other sources is about 74 million for next fiscal year. This assumes that we're going to be issuing about $6 million of bonds to cover some the financing of some of our capital improvement projects. You'll see a little bit later in the presentation, we have a pretty aggressive capital improvement program for next year. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. This covers our debt service. This is the second to last year of the debt service on our two bonds outstanding. The debt service on that about $2 million. We do have a lot of capital projects carried over from the current fiscal year of about 11 million, and new capital projects for next year is about 12 million. Our overall, with that budget in place, our operating reserves will continue to be strong at about 50% of our annual budget, operating budget, I should say. And our capital reserves, we actually have now met the board's goal of having at least 10% in capital reserves. We're hoping when we go to issue our net set of bonds, that'll increase our bond rating, which is currently right now is a split rating of A+ or AA3 as well too. And also this covers, like I mentioned, our other funds as well too. So our three basically funds that relate to the Water Resources Agency, their combined budget is about $9 million. Our continued investment relating to our renewable energy projects and pure water as well too. So just as a reminder, the pure water rates for next year for the Water Management District in Cal-Am is about $41.77 per acre foot. And for Marina Coast, it's a little bit smaller at $38.64 per acre foot. That basically reflects revised assumptions for their production. Like we mentioned last time, we're assuming we're only going to be producing about 400 acre feet for them for next year. And one of the things I updated for this slide from last time, this obviously last time showed all of our member entities and their rates for next fiscal year. I also updated this to kind of show how we selected our member entities versus our comparables in our agencies. The median of those comparables is about $76. If you look at the median of our members, which I kind of look at Marina and Monterey, it's between about 65 to 68. So we're pretty much, in line, maybe a little bit lower than the medians that we compare against. And really just to kind of summarize the budget itself, the biggest increases, reasons for the increases alone, they have to do with basically the cost of living adjustments, some assumptions. Obviously, the MOUs have not yet been approved by the board. We have some personnel changes, which again, I'll just summarize again in a minute. Biggest operating costs, like we mentioned before, are chemicals and utilities. Those continue to increase at a faster pace than inflation. And this budget also includes our capital outlay, which we'll talk about in a minute as well too.
Hey, Fred, can I just jump in for a second? So I know you've all heard this like on the 23rd, but Fred did some work, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fred. We've been saying our O&M is going up primarily because of chemicals and electricity, utilities in general. So what does that mean for this budget? The non-personnel part of the budget increased 24%. That's reflected in here. That's not just chemicals and power. It's other things that at the plant break and our staff has to replace. So if you wanted to dive into any of that, when we look at the cost areas that are increasing the most, that's one. So Jose can certainly be responsive to any questions. The second, of course, is our capital projects, which you see increasing dramatically from past years. So if you wanted to ask any questions, certainly Matt can respond to those. But I just wanted to highlight, when I say 24%, that's impactful versus, oh, it's going up a bit. Our personnel rates are also going up by about more like 15%, but that includes not just PERS, health, salary, but also the addition of some personnel that you see reflected in the budget. Once again, it helps in my mind to get an understanding of the magnitude and why there's the need to go out for debt financing. So just wanted to sort of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paul. Let me go forward to the next slide. Yeah, and just to remind the board, not a lot of personnel changes that we're proposing again for next year. They're kind of focused in a few different areas. In employee services, because our number of full-time employees are going above 100, there's just a lot of additional administrative requirements related for the agency itself. So we're looking to add an employee services technician. We talked about the expanded capital improvement program. So as a result of that, we're looking to add an assistant engineer, a part-time engineering intern, and to basically raise the level of our current engineering technician inspector to a senior level to just handle the more complex duties that person increasingly faces over time. The other big thing for us as well too is a continued focus on technology. And so we're looking to kind of reclassify one of our positions, the record specialist, to change to a business systems architect, so they can focus in particular are looking for a new accounting system, CMMS, and a couple of our other areas as well too. And then adding a part-time IS technician as well too, which will kind of just provide better base level support, both for admin and for the plant as well too. So it's about a 3% staffing change for next year. And the costs are about $500,000 impact to the wastewater fund and about $159,000 for the pure water fund. So the pure water fund, basically, we're looking to add an operator 3 in that fund as well too. And the key thing is that we continue to really incorporate, the high priority goals, established by the exec team and by the board as well too, in the proposed budget for next year, with a primary emphasis on infrastructure, making sure our operations continue to be reliable, securing grant funding whenever we can to augment our additional funding sources, and continuing to really focus on basically net neutral, ways that we can reduce both our water and energy use, and focusing on safety as well too, and training of our staff as we continue to strive to be an employer of choice. As I mentioned before, our capital plan for the wastewater fund is about $30 million. There's several different components to it. Basically, I mentioned these earlier, the carryover of about 11 million, new capital improvement projects of 12 million. And then the 3 other smaller components, basically our continued capital maintenance that we do on our plant. The IT and it's investing some additional things. Primarily that relates to the replacement of the new accounting system, starting to look for that, and departmental capital outlay of about another 4 million. So as far as the major capital projects go, the biggest ones by far, the board already previously approved this, was the continuation of the rehab of the pump stations for both Monterey and Seaside. Other significant ones include a final effluent meter, Fort Ord pipe repair, fire pump station, fire pump storage tanks, and the pump station 15. And Matt, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on any of the proposed new projects for next year.
No, but I can finish the list
Yeah.
there. The digester mixers project, that was to improve our anaerobic digestion process so we can introduce food waste to that and boost our production of valuable biogas. That project's in progress. Having an aging plant near the seashore, we have quite a bit of corrosion, and so we have an ongoing corrosion control budget line item to cover ongoing recoating or replacement of materials that's corroded. Secondary clarifier drives. This is an ongoing project to improve the mechanical parts of important part of our original treatment plant, secondary clarifiers. The big one that we're starting this year, this is a new capital project, digester gas handling and heating improvements. This is necessary to accommodate the additional biogas production that we will anticipate with food waste co-digestion. Really, this equipment is original and has reached the end of its useful life. It's probably a project that we needed to do anyways. So this food waste co-digestion has created an opportunity to do that. We believe there's actually potential for some of that project cost to be offset by what's called an investment tax credit associated with the Inflation Reduction Act. But we've planned for the worst case scenario, which is us funding the full cost of the project. The project called the Salinas Pump Station Pump Around. This is essentially adding a pump to the Salinas Pump Station. It gives us a sort of belt and suspenders safety at the Salinas Pump Station. If we were to completely lose power, including backup power at the Salinas Pump Station, it's a good idea to have a backup pump there that we could continue to move sewage towards the regional treatment plant. And then last but not least, this is really important. If we can improve the energy resilience of our existing facilities, and we could improve our solids handling, then we can turn our attention towards the eventual replacement of the liquid part of the regional treatment plant. But we have to start with a good plan. And so we have a modest budget line item for a master plan for a comprehensive upgrade of the regional treatment plant. This would be a very significant project that would be planned in the longer term horizon, like the 7 to 12 years out kind of horizon. But we need to start with a good plan. So we want to start with this master plan. That's all for me.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And then on to IT, basically. So we, as I mentioned before, the accounting system is by far the biggest one. But Frank, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit on the major projects for next year.
Sure. Yeah, as Fred mentioned, our biggest expense coming up is going to be the accounting system replacement. Our current system is going to be sunsetted by the manufacturer. So we're basically forced to move on from that. And the next large item, which is a couple years down the line, but that's looking at a CMMS system upgrade or replacement. It'll be approaching its 10-year useful life. And then several items on here are really related to cybersecurity focus. So the access control and surveillance, that's a big one. That was also identified in the last strategic plan from 2015. The cybersecurity is our match for the grant funding that we have for I believe it's a $1.6 million project. Strategic plan and governance, that's also going to relate to cybersecurity. And then the last two items on there related to the business network upgrade and the server infrastructure in the future. That's planning out for the end of useful life of that particular equipment. It's important that we stay up to date so that we can continue to get security updates. Just to point out, there was a time when you could buy a piece of equipment, and as long as it functioned, you were good. In today's landscape, that's not quite the way it works with IT equipment anymore. Once you purchase it, often there are subscriptions that you must follow or keep up to date to get those security enhancements. And the manufacturers actually stop providing those security updates. So what in the past may have lasted 10 or more years, we're now looking at a useful life of about 7.
Great, thanks, Frank. And what we talked about with these capital projects, this is part of a pretty extensive plan that, Matt's kind of talked about earlier as well, too. I mean, we're looking at basically over a 10-year period, capital improvements. This doesn't include like departmental capital outlay and the IT of about $330 million. So it's a quite aggressive program that we're looking to do. And when we start our fee study, we'll obviously be incorporating this as part of, what we'll be needing to fund for going forward in the future.
And Fred, just looking at 24-25, which we're approving, there's also rollover capital outlay, major maintenance. So the total capital expenditure, because I know the board, that's why we did the rate increase those years ago. The total capital expenditure is in excess of 23 million this year.
The total is 30 million, Paul?
30 million. Thank you.
Yeah, this is just, and that's a good point. The 24-25 strictly relates pretty much the new capital programs, not like the departmental capital outlay. So if you added that on, that's basically makes it almost like 345 million. So, a very aggressive program that we have in place, but a lot of needed improvements. We talked about with the board a little bit, what we might need to look as far as future rate increases. So just as a reminder for the board, one of the things we do when we'll do the rate study, we'll look at basically operating expense trends to see. We made certain assumptions when we presented this to the board last time about basically a 10% operating, overall increase over time. We'll dive a lot more into details, when we have the study done to see what that really looks like and what kind of rate increase we needed. But just as a reminder, we did a couple different scenarios where we looked at increasing rates and on average, either about 13% or 15%, starting in 26, 27. And with this, the idea is to basically maintain our operating reserves that the board's approved, our capital reserve that the bond's approved, and maintaining, which is obviously really important because we'll be needing to issue debt for this, sufficient debt coverage as well, too. So these were just kind of a reminder of those scenarios. We're assuming the bonds, when we issue them, are going to be at rates ranging between about 4.5% to 5%, depending on if we issue private bonds or if we SRF. SRF might be a little bit lower. They tend to be a lot harder to get. So we're not assuming for right now, although we'll be trying to get them, but we're assuming primarily it'll be private bonds and WIFIA bonds. So these were the two scenarios that we kind of presented last time. One of the things the board wants us to basically look into for going forward in the future is changing the amortization schedule on CalPERS. To right now, we have it about over a 20-year period. The board suggested that we look into something that changes it more to a 15-year period. So it does increase the payments early on, but you have significant interest savings as you go forward with it of about almost $4 million over time. You can actually reduce it again. We mentioned this board last time. You could reduce it to a 10-year period, but you're increasing your payments by another over $1 million a year. So it doesn't mean we couldn't potentially look at that in the future, but we wanted to focus on something where, it'd be minimal impact on rates. So that was our suggestion, was to look at more of the 15 years, kind of like a, middle option for us. And I thought there was something else. Well, the board also suggested, and Paul mentioned this too, we'll be looking at it to see if it's feasible or not, to look about potentially doing a rate increase earlier. We'll just have to see, and we'll come back to the board with, some suggestions for going forward. And that's all I had. Paul, did you want to mention anything?
No.
Oh, go ahead.
Questions from the board? I do have a question. So one of your first slides showed the increase to CalAm for pure water Monterey water per acre foot.
Yeah.
But doesn't that require one of those letters to go to the CPUC? So my question is, when can we actually start collecting the 41.77 per acre foot? Is that going to be July 1st, or is that going to have to wait for some CPUC proceeding?
So Fred, correct me, you sent this to Cal-Am and the Water Management District
May 1st.
May 1st. Okay. So what we've done in the past, the last 3 years, is we'll send it to Cal-Am and Water Management District. They prepare the tier 1 advice letter, which is truly, as I mentioned last time, just a letter that goes to CPUC. So come the, I guess, August timeframe, when they'll be paying for the July water, the new rate is in effect. Obviously, we keep an eye on that and hope that that occurs over those 3 months, because they got it May 1st, so May, June, July is the time frame.
Okay. Yeah, let's hope that doesn't get delayed.
Now, there is an issue with that, but thank you for bringing up the schedule. Is whatever that trigger is to get into tier 2, we would need to do that much earlier so as to recoup our costs starting July 1 or for the July month. But I've never had a definition of what that might be. So thus far, we've been successful in the tier 1 advice letters.
Is there anything in our agreement, water purchase agreement with Cal-Am, that requires them to give us sufficient notice with regard to a tier 2, that longer?
I don't think it differentiates between tier 1 and tier 2. It's just the rate increase itself, which says we'll get to them, prior to the fiscal year. So the May 1st timeframe. Fred, do you remember anything in there?
I not on the distinction between a 1 and 2. Paul.
I mean, we can certainly take a look at that.
Yeah, if you take a look, I'd hate for us to get caught out, 6 months later or 9 months later, and we're getting paid the prior years.
Right.
Because that wouldn't be right for us, et cetera. All right, thank you very much.
I had a
Archie.
question. I can't remember if it was reflected in your presentation, but we had a discussion last board meeting about increasing the community assistance program from 200,000 to 300,000.
Yes.
Was that incorporated in this budget presented here?
Yes. So on the 4th bullet down, we did reflect the increase from 200 to 300 for the customer assistance program for fiscal year 24-25.
And we're gonna adopt the half for renters, half for homeowners provision to this?
So I don't know if we have the data yet on what has come in from a volume perspective on June 1st. Okay, so we're still looking at, so the time frame closed like the board requested as of June 1st. We need to go through to see how much could be approved for that, and then come back to the board going, and I'm going to make this up if that's okay. $160,000 was approved for the homeowners, so that would mean 140 is left for renters. Board, are you okay with that, or do we want to take more out of reserves? Or it could be the inverse. So we actually have to get more data to come back with you on this.
I thought that we had agreed at our last board meeting as part of the motion to set aside a specific amount for renters. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Jim?
sorry.
Was
Yeah.
it what?
100,000 you added your reserve for renters.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think, but the discussion was they would like it to be 50-50. We just didn't know what would be approved at that point.
I remember it being part of the motion that it would be 150,000 set aside for renters.
What I recall that we were going to raise it to 300,000, and whatever that difference is where we're at now, which is about 50-50.
Yeah. Okay.
But I can't, what number are we spending right now? We spent for the homeowners? How much?
It was projected right as of a couple of, when we looked last week, is like 157.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we said we went to 300, which is pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll certainly come back to the board with those numbers once we've processed the applications in thus far. And the renter program won't start until September 1. So we do have a little time if the board would so like to modify.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Director Urbino.
I have a quick question. The previous slide, it had the CSIP and then it said, where it
Slide
said it
3, maybe. Yeah.
So looks like it's down. I think you mentioned that last time. Utilities overhead capital. When it comes to like the capital improvements within the CSIP system, because there's a lot of aging parts.
Right.
Is that something that you guys have to get together with water resources and then you have, so you don't set aside ahead of time? It's kind of, you talk it over, you decide, and then you plan it out that way?
Yeah, so between engineering and operations and maintenance, they do come up with a recommended, but it's incumbent upon Water Resources Agency to either say yes or no and then get the funding to do that. This particular year, it was cut, the recommended capital expenditure was cut dramatically to meet the budget that, the revenues that Water Resources Agency has.
Okay.
And I think, Jose, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been that way for a long time now, where the proposed capital is always reduced based on available funding.
Yes, correct. It's, we work closely with WRA, especially because they start their budgeting process very early in the year, usually around January, February. And it's similar to the process we use in-house for the RTP. We propose and identify projects that are in need, and we prioritize them based on criticality. And then they come to the table with projects they'd like to complete, and then we rank them, and then we kind of, you know, do a mixed match of some of their projects, some of our projects. But as Paul mentioned, this year we cut quite a bit, and we're focusing a lot on the CSIP side of improvements, not so much at the SVRP this year.
Yeah, I think, moving forward, modernizing a lot of those controls and switches and valves would probably save a lot of overhead down the road. So something that we need to think about. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? All right, I do have a follow-up to Director Habino. So your answer with respect to CSIP also applies to SVRP and SRDF, correct?
I was going to say, we've had to defer a number of capital improvements. I mean, basically, it's kind of like what Jose was saying earlier. We talked with them, but they're constrained by their revenues that they're generating. So, but they have come up, I think, with a 5-year plan.
Yes, our engineering team developed a 5-year CIP, and they're actually trying to project it out 10 years to identify those critical items. Fortunately, I mean, even though SVRP has been online for 26 years, as far as like the automation, it was ahead of its time, especially compared to the RTP. So we're hanging on, doing small repairs and kind of Band-Aids, so to speak. But overall, there isn't a whole lot of moving parts for that facility, so we're able to maintain it relatively well.
So do you get a sense, one thing we've had to struggle with, and we are struggling is the right word, making decisions about in this budget is funding capital with borrowed money versus funding capital with previously saved reserve money. And there's pros and cons, trade-offs to that we've discussed. And I think most of our directors here understand the nature of that trade-off and have struggled with it to try and make it as right as we can for our own customers. Do you get a sense that the Board of Directors of Monterey County Resources Agency, where I assume these same similar decisions need to be made about CSIP, SVRP, and SRDF, do you see them understanding those issues as well as our board understands those issues and those trade-offs to serve their customers?
So I did attend the Water Resources Agency board meeting where they recommended the increase for CSIP and SRDF. And I'm not exactly answering your question directly, but what I'm going to say is during that presentation, there was not an option for debt financing. It was solely the water delivery fee per acre. That was how they were looking at funding. Now, that's not all the funding for CSIP, SRDF, and so on. But at least my involvement or my participation, they haven't talked about the debt financing for this. I know in discussions with Ara, their general manager, they do discuss that on a broader base perspective in reference to the dams and other responsibilities they have, but nothing certain. So in terms of, do they have the understanding like you all have? I don't know. All I can say is what I've been present to see or not. I don't know if Supervisor Church has any insight into that or not, that he can share.
I don't know if have a lot onto there I could really add in from what you've stated.
I guess maybe, and you tell me if this is a misplaced concern. So we are operating these systems. We've been operating them in some cases for quite a few years. But they are making the capital decisions about renewal of this stuff. If it breaks at some point in some expensive reactive maintenance situation, potentially we get the blame, but the blame is shared because perhaps that could have been avoided if we'd saved up and invested and had a better replacement plan for that stuff. So since some of that decision-making is in their hands, their board's hands, I would hope we're kind of helping them with that in a really strong way so that we don't end up in a embarrassing situation.
You know, we meet with Water Resources Agency staff frequently at all levels, and convey our concerns. But as Director Hibino alluded to, not that many years ago, there was a section of pipe that broke, and there wasn't shut-off valves close enough, so it put them out of water for a large number of growers. Large, not all 26, but more than should have been. And that just goes to the maintenance age of the system and how it was constructed initially. So certainly, I haven't, and I don't know if Jose, you have, I haven't sensed blame going, it's because you guys didn't do the required maintenance or capital projects. It is more of a, how do we get this done quickly in a reactive maintenance situation?
Yes, I agree. It's very collaborative, and our group, operations, maintenance, utilities, we identify single points of failure or equipment that if it does fail, it can be detrimental to production. For example, chemical dosing, anything with the chlorine system, the reclamation pumps. So there is fortunately a lot of redundancy, and the thing that does lend itself well to maintenance for SVRP is the fact that inevitably every year we shut down anywhere from a few weeks to several months. And we've been able to keep up. It lends itself better to keep up with the maintenance of it. So again, there is some stuff that's aging, but we every year evaluate it and make recommendations on what can come back, and bite us. So we work closely with them, and we do identify like, look, this is a little more important because, a valve could shut down the entire system. A chlorine system failing, not only do you lose SVRP, you lose the river. So we kind of put those scenarios out there for them to help influence the decision and priorities.
Okay, good. And thank you, Director Hibino, for triggering that conversation. One other sort of related question, looking at this particular slide, and this is just for future consideration, should we have perhaps a little bit different reserve policy, say for the Pure Water Fund, or when we get into it, to the Renewable Energy Fund, than the rest of our wastewater funds? I'm wondering if future reserve policies ought to be customized to the particular fund that they apply to.
We can definitely, do that. I mean, we obviously started with the wastewater fund, but it makes sense. we would obviously on the reclamation funds, we'd have to work with the Water Resources
Right,
Agency
of
on that
course.
one. But the renewable and pure water, absolutely, we could look to. And so we could look when we come back with next year's budget, we can kind of come up with some suggestions for the board for going forward.
Yeah, and just looking to past history where we spent, I believe it was 12 years with flat rates for our wastewater customers. Part of the justification for that was we had a new system, and why did you have to replace stuff on a brand new system? But we weren't saving up money in reserves, so we would have enough when we did need to do the stuff we needed to do today. The same thing could happen with Pure Water Monterey. And I would hate for us to repeat past mistake that was made. So thus, maybe the reserve policy for Pure Water Monterey, for example, needs to be a little different from wastewater and these other fund areas.
And certainly within the loans for Pure Water Monterey, there's a provision for a replacement and rehabilitation fund that you have to go into, which makes all sense in the world because you don't want an asset hitting the end of its useful life and then just falling to pieces. So certainly we can develop reserve policies specific to the area that the board can approve, but it'll also be reflective of our contractual agreements on those.
And certainly it's good that those provisions are in the loan documents, contractual agreements and so forth, but we have to keep in mind that those are agreements written in 2021 or 2020 to say save up a certain amount, but you get to 2026 or 2027, 28, you now know what inflation in construction materials has been like, and you can look and see, whoa, have we been under saving or, God forbid, we're over saving in terms of putting into reserves for that from what the agreements require. So, all right, thank you. Other comments and questions?
I don't really have any questions, but I don't think we've gone to public comment yet, but
We
thank
haven't
you.
yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the information that was provided. I'm certainly supportive of this budget that's been proposed tonight. I think most importantly, you know, that you are looking to the future with the budget and you're looking to capital improvements, which have to be made over time. And you can see that in the chart. That chart that has all the many millions of dollars that we're going to spend on the plant and other things. So I'm very supportive of that. I'm really glad that this agency focuses on making sure through Paul's leadership that we're always looking at what we need to have fixed and we don't leave something to chance or have, try to the best we can to avoid major disasters. We've had a couple of things that the storms we just couldn't predict in the last couple of years, but I think the staff did an excellent job getting things back on track at the lowest cost possible. And so I feel that, I'm very supportive of this budget. I'm ready to make a motion to approve it and we can take further discussion and public comment, but I think it's going in the right direction. I think that, we need to look to the future and that's exactly what our staff is doing. So that's a great thing.
I'll second your motion.
Okay.
Obviously recognizing we have to go to public comment, but
Yep.
I'll second your motion.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we do have a motion and a second on the floor, and it's time for public to comment on the motion. So anyone from the public here in the room who wishes to come up to the podium, or if you're on Zoom, use your Zoom hand. I don't see anyone calling in on a landline or a telephone. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back for a vote. All
Comments on it?
Oh, if you'd like final comments, I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
hear that.
No worries.
Please.
Yeah, I want to echo the comments made by Director Smith. I really support the direction of this budget. I think it protects the efforts you've made to increase reserves while also spending on capital, which is important. And I really just want to highlight that we are increasing the community assistance payment program, which in this economy is something that is so critical. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of governments having to cut back on these kinds of services due to financial downturns. But it's really, inspiring that an organization like ours is choosing to not go down that route, but rather increasing assistance programs for our community during this difficult economic time. So thank you for your leadership.
Other final comments from directors? None. Staff, good work. Thank you very much on this. We know it's a hard balancing act to keep our system and our personnel properly functioning and yet not overburden our ratepayers. So we're ready for vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous approval. Thank you very much. You now have a budget, Mr. Shudo, and go forth and do good things with it. We get to agenda item 10, staff reports.
So first of all, thank you for the discussion and the work on the budget over the last few months. Very much appreciate the input, and hopefully it reflects everything that we have heard. I think I mentioned at one of the committee meetings, but I wanted to focus on a trip that I was able to take with Rachel and to Washington, D.C. back at the beginning of May in association with our D.C. lobbyists back there. It's been a number of years since I've been back, and I know it's something that we've tried to do here is establish a legislative advocacy program both at the state and federal level to open up the possibilities for grant funding, but also policy discussions on regulations or other laws that are coming online that affect us, that we can have input, that we are at the table, if you will. So it's, like I said, been a long time through COVID that I haven't been back. It was great to get back there. Things have changed dramatically. But I was hoping Rachel could actually provide the details because, that was 4 weeks ago and it's hard to remember yesterday. So.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Good evening. So as Paul mentioned, we had a really successful trip to DC earlier in May. We had a series of meetings with federal stakeholders, including 2 industry associations, so Water Reuse and the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. And then we met with the House Sustainable Energy and Environmental Coalition, the White House Council on Environmental Quality, the Department of Interior, and the Bureau of Reclamation, EPA, and then EPA's WIFIA program, who is our lender for the expansion of Pure Water Monterey. And then we met with staff at Senators Butler and Padilla's offices, Representative Lofgren's team, and then we met with Representative Panetta and his team as well. So each conversation was really tailored to the audience with discussions around the opportunities and challenges we face in our future. So key topics focused on who we are and what we do, sustainability and climate change, previewing the net zero concept in your new strategic plan, biosolids and forever chemicals, and then the water energy nexus as we embark on our new renewable energy portfolio. So lots of really inspiring conversations. As Paul mentioned, this is not a new program. Our federal advocacy efforts have been many years in the making, but it's really great to, be on the Hill and to walk into meetings and people know us. They know us. We've been going back. Paul hasn't been back for a few years, but Mike and I have been going back. And so we have connections there, and they're always really eager and excited to hear what we're doing. And they actually asked us this time if we'd be willing to get on a call in the future and just brainstorm with them on how we brainstorm. How do we come up with the ideas and the innovative efforts and projects here in Monterey County? So some follow-up items will be continued discussions with WIFIA on some potential funding options. We're going to be developing an advocacy database to help further foster our federal relationships. And then we have virtual meetings coming up with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and then the Department of Energy. Thank you. We appreciate that you value and see the value in heading back to DC and advocating for the agency. I'm happy to answer any questions on the platform in general or the specific series of meetings we had in May.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions from directors?
Excellent.
Keep doing the great work y'all are doing.
That's the plan.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, got one. All right, so for those of you that serve on the Recycled Water Committee, you know that staff introduced an update to our interruptible rates on May 16th. These are the rates that apply to non-sewage waters with an alternate disposal method that are capable of being switched off when not necessary for water recycling. An example is industrial wastewater from the city of Salinas. There are a lot of details that go into calculating those rates, so we have decided to delay our recommendation for approval of those slightly to allow for some more time for outreach. We've already been meeting with staff from Monterey County Water Resources Agency and will continue to do so through the month of June. And in late June and early July, we intend to meet with City of Salinas representatives. We're aiming to bring the interruptible rates back to the Recycled Water Committee on July 18th and then to the full board for approval on July 29th. And as part of the Recycled Water Committee discussion, a question was raised about whether interruptible rates are subject to the public notification procedures of Proposition 218. Just want to let you know, we will bring a full response to that particular question when we return to the board. The short answer is that our legal and professional rate consultants have advised us that because those rates are voluntary, that they're subject to special agreements and they're reasonable, and they're really not a requirement of property ownership like typical sewer rates, that they are not subject to the typical Proposition 218 public notification procedures. That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other staff reports? Mr. McCullough.
Just real quick, I gave 2 public tours this month. It was kind of a weird month with the holidays and people gone. And then I had a chance to go up to Sacramento and speak in front of the Water Resources Control Board. I will echo what Rachel said. A lot of the commissioners know us. They know of our projects. And one of the directors said that we were coming with a solution to a problem versus always coming up and talking about a problem. So just we continue to get out there and hustle to try to make sure people understand what we're doing here, not only on the waterfront, but the energy front. That's it.
Thank you very much. Any other staff reports? That's it. All right, we go to agenda item 11, which is board member comments. Any comments from board members on my left? On my right, yes, Director Ragsdale Cronin.
Oh, thank you. One question, we got a letter from Bridget McGrath Massey, or at least I got a copy of it, that she sent out questioning the tax, putting the thing on the tax. And I've been asked numerous times, why is it going to be embedded in taxes? Why is it going to be embedded in taxes? We need to get the word out. It's a line item on the tax bill, just like MCRWA, just like mosquito abatement, just like everybody else. But people are really focusing in that my 1.5% property taxes, this is going to slide into that number. And they don't understand that it's going to be a line item over on the other side of the page for that all the other stuff that we pay for.
And I think the important thing on that is as well too, when you get your property tax bill, there's really 2 sections.
Right.
There's one for taxes and there's one for basically fees that the county collects for other agencies.
So we keep saying we're going to do it on the tax roll, and that's freaking people out. So we need to get the word out that it's a fee and it's going on the fee side. Yeah, just on the outreach program as we go out. But I hear it from people. I see it in the paper. I see it on Nextdoor. You know, I see it on Facebook, wherever people are commenting, they're adding it to our taxes. It's a fee in the fee schedule part. So make sure we get that out there.
So Director Ragsdale Cronin,
Yes, sir.
it does seem to me that there's an easy solution to this. We could throw the county under the bus and point out that it is the county tax assessor that puts the title onto that document. And a better title would be your property tax and government services bill.
Right.
But at any rate, since I just threw the county under the bus, I should let Director Church have his say.
So could I just hold your
deliberation or discussion on this. These are board member comments, and because
Sorry,
of
that
the
was a
Brown
comment.
Act, we're restricted
Yes.
to receiving comments, but not taking actions or deliberating on them.
So
Do you have a comment you'd like to make?
have you comment on this matter? I won't be,
We're not throwing you under the bus. so.
yeah. Okay. I do, want to follow up on some of the misunderstandings that come on with this. Was about a month ago, I had a meeting with Mary Zeb, who's the assessor tax collector and the person that Mr. Moore wants to throw under the bus. But so right back to you, Tom.
Yeah, I can wait to get my next property tax bill.
So one thing is that a lot of people bring up about all this issue is they're concerned since it's on the tax roll, if they don't pay it, they're going to lose their property. But my understanding is from my understanding with discussion with her is that on sewer rates, if somebody's paying the rest of their tax bill, they don't pay this, they're not going to lose their home.
We'll have to look it up and come back to you.
Yep, there you go. Some homework for you.
Thank you very much, Director Church. Any other board member comments? All right, seeing none, we go to agenda item 12, public comments and closed session item. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters appearing in closed session may do so at this time. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes or less. All right, seeing none, quick 5-minute break and we'll go into closed session. All right. We are out of closed session. That was agenda item 13, conference with labor negotiators. We are on agenda item 14, announcements from closed session. Were there any reportable actions in closed session?
Chair Moore, there are no reportable actions coming out of closed session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilpin. Our attorney has just confirmed. So we stand adjourned. The next board meeting is the 24th of June.
I will miss that.
Not even Zoom? You can't even Zoom in?
No, I can't make it by Zoom either. So don't bring in good food down.
Oh, we're having so much.
Oh,
That's the rib.